Hello, everybody. So today we're talking about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and the 24-hour abandoned coup, where there were soldiers that were fighting on behalf of the Kremlin, decided to actually turn against the Kremlin, which really begs the question, well, what does this mean for Putin's sphere of influence after, 20 years in power, the main man in charge? So, Dean, what actually happened then with this coup?
Thanks, Tom. So the leader of the mercenary Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, publicly accused Russia's defense minister of destroying his fighters and of concocting lies to justify the invasion of Ukraine. So quite inflammatory statements from an important individual within Putin's sphere there. This disagreement escalated to the extent that Prigozhin and a group of his troops took up arms and started to march towards Moscow. In the end, it's understood that some sort of deal was made with Belarus acting as the intermediator to end the revolt, with Prigozhin going into exile. The coup, the attempted coup, the revolt, was over in less than 24 hours, and we're still no clearer on the exact reasons why. As you can imagine, speculation runs rife. Some say it was political ambition. Some say he didn't want Wagner being subsumed into the Russian army, and the man himself says it was a protest over the ineffectual conduct of the war.
So what do you think then, Dean, this means for Putin and his sort of grasp of power in Russia, and what do you think it means then for the conflict in the Ukraine?
So as you can imagine, it's quite difficult to say, but two things really come to mind. The Wagner Group were an important fighting force for Russia in the invasion of Ukraine, and so Russia's effectiveness in the campaign against the Ukraine may well be diminished. It's coming at a really important moment for Ukraine as they're mounting a counteroffensive, so this might start to give them a bit of an advantage in that respect. Secondly, this event represented a material challenge to Putin's authority, certainly the first like it, and this has led some to question his longevity as the de facto ruler of Russia.
Okay, so let's move it on to what we hope to know a bit more about, which is the economic impact. So when Russia invaded Ukraine, it kind of sparked an energy crisis, which added to the exacerbated inflation problem that existed post-COVID, which kind of ultimately led to, we've got a bit of a cost of living crisis, and then we have interest rates at the highest levels that we've seen for about 15 years or so. So there's been a huge economic impact. Now, if there was a change of the guard in the Kremlin, do you think that would be have a positive economic impact, or do you think it would have a negative impact?
So you're right to say, Tom, that the conflict has taken an enormous economic toll, not to mention the humanitarian tragedy. It resulted in a very large redrawing of energy markets, particularly sort of in Europe, as you can imagine. And this has forced Europe to rebalance its energy supplies away from Russia. Even if Putin were replaced, would Europe be willing to increase its reliance on Russia once again? Probably not. Now they've gone to such efforts to diversify their supply chains. In the very near term, if the conflict escalates, we might see a pickup in energy market volatility, which could have an inflationary impact, but it's unlikely to be as material as when the conflict first kicked off.
So final question, so that's the economic impact. What about the impact to the investment markets?
Sure. In reality, the impact should be fairly small. If you think about where we've come from, Russian assets make up a tiny proportion of global equity and fixed income markets. They were removed from MSCI indices in March of 2022. And before then, it was only about 40 basis points of global equities in any case. What was more material were global companies and their operations in Russia. So think BP, Coca-Cola, Levi, IKEA, and most of which have sold or simply given away their assets in Russia as part of the sanctions program. So a big earnings reset there in that respect. You can't do that again. The companies have already given away their assets. So a kind of continued downside from a global earnings perspective is likely to be pretty limited from here. In terms of the most recent episode, so what we saw over the weekend, the market impact was fairly limited, partly because the issue opened and closed over the weekend, and so there was no interim period of uncertainty, and we've seen no lasting impacts in markets this week.
Okay, so kind of a minimal impact then. So it's sometimes surprising actually how these huge geopolitical issues have such a small impact to investment markets. That's probably a topic for another day. Look, Dean, thanks so much for your time today. It's a difficult topic to cover, so thanks for covering it. And thanks everyone for watching. And we'll be back again next week with another episode.
Thanks, Tom.